Now we're going to turn our focus to the law and how does the law bring justice. So I'd like to introduce Mary Hasson. Mary is a dear friend that I've known for many, many years. So that's most important, she's a friend. But she's an attorney and she's with the Ethics and Public Policy Center where she holds the role of the Kate O'Byrne Senior Fellow. And she runs a project at Ethics and Public Policy Center called the Person and Identity Project. So I welcome Mary Hasson.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you all for being here, and to our panelists, of course. As the preceding panels have made clear, we have witnessed a decades-long medical scandal, and it shocks the conscience. I mean, I've been immersed in this world really for almost a decade now in terms of research and policy, and yet to hear anew the stories of the detransitioners that we've heard today, it still cuts to the quick. Unfortunately, our legal system has played a significant role in creating and perpetuating this scandal. Through indifference, failing to prevent medical professionals from promoting unethical practices, as well as conducting unethical experiments, shielding medical and pharmaceutical industries from accountability and liability, and by failing to erect and enforce legal safeguards. As the last election made clear, the American people demand something different, and certainly everyone here in this room expects that. So we're grateful to legislators, both here in Congress, as well as in the state capitals, who are listening to detransitioners, listening to their families, but also willing to take action to ensure justice and care for those who have been so wronged. So our panelists today have been engaged with the legal sector in a variety of ways, from legislatures to litigation, and we're eager to hear what they have to say. So let me introduce our panelists and we'll get right to our questions. Shawn Thierry, in the middle, is an attorney and former Texas state legislator. She served 4 terms, and she's now the executive director for Policy and Counsel at Texas Southern University. She's also a policy advisor for GenSpect. Erin Friday, at the end, far end, is a California attorney specializing in parental rights and educational advocacy. She's been a leader in the advocacy group Our Duty, and the mother of a formerly trans-identified teen. Erin.
Thank you.
And then our third panelist, Sorinel Daco, who you've heard from today, but she's a young woman from Texas, previously identified as transgender, suffered medical consequences, detransitioned, is now a powerful voice against this. So Sorin, I'm going to begin with you. Dr. Paul McHugh, who was the Johns Hopkins psychiatrist who shut down the Johns Hopkins Gender Clinic back in 1979 for lack of evidence, although it was reopened in 2017, he looked at the evidence and he said, this is not helping anyone, shut it down. And then he has long said that what truly is going to end this scandal is going to be the lawsuits. And so, Sorin, you have gone through a lot personally. And then in the past couple of years, you brought one of the first lawsuits by a detransitioned person against your providers. So tell us about that. Tell us why you sued, the obstacles you faced, and kind of where things are.
Yeah, so I had experienced those pretty severe complications I told you all about earlier with my mastectomy, right? But after that happened, my first instinct was I don't want to hurt anybody else trying to get this care. At the same time, I knew, like, hey, look, like, these providers were bad providers, and there has to be other bad providers out there. So maybe I should look into this. And when I started to, I realized no one wanted to touch this case with a 10-foot pole. I had posted my story on Twitter at one point. I felt that was maybe the best way to get my message out, that, hey, the Crane Center in particular is horrendously bad, and you guys should watch out, and here's my story and my process of reclamation. And people advised me there too to seek legal recourse, but of course my experience had been very poor with that, and I was like, no, that's not going to happen. But then came about Campbell Miller Payne Law Group. They are the first law group in our country to represent detransitioners, specifically to take on cases related to gender identity and gender ideology specifically. They all left their cushy, big law jobs to pursue this. All of them have big families to take care of. And yet they knew that this was the place to fight, that this was the arena to get involved in, and for good reason, right? And I wanted to get involved, not because I wanted to make money off of it. I've said since the very beginning, since before I even met these guys, that if I make a penny off of it, I'll be happy. I don't care about the money. What I care about is that other people do not face the harm that I faced, that these practitioners are held accountable, because I knew that if they're motivated by money, what's gonna hurt them most is getting hit in the pocket. What's gonna hurt them most is being faced with the consequences of their actions and of their disregard for the most basic duty of care that physicians have, which is to do no harm. And so I started working with Campbell Miller Payne. Ron Miller is my attorney. Keep him in your prayers. He's going through some medical complications himself right now. But they've treated me very good. Their head's all in the right space. I faced some hurdles because for any of you who know what law is like, it's full of hurdles. They'll throw everything at you and the kitchen sink. And, you know, we've had some dismissals over Statute 74, I believe it's called, Chapter 74, something to that effect. I'm not a lawyer. And successfully fought many of those. All the practitioners that we originally brought into the case are still in the case, except for one we let out at the very beginning. The nurse practitioner, or the psychiatrist, not the nurse practitioner, the psychiatrist. I didn't mention him earlier, but he was the one who, when I was an inpatient, very much told me, or I did mention him, very much told me that, you know, the root of my mental health issues was because I was a boy, and kind of affirmed this belief that my transgender identity was central to every other struggle I had had in my life. We let him out because it was so long ago. The statute of limitations would have been very hard to argue because in the state of Texas, you only have 2 years from and it's argued whether it's the date of harm or the day the harm is realized to seek legal recourse, which is very much no time at all for something such as this, something that is so complex, that is so deeply embedded in my other mental health issues, and also in this kind of cultural guilt that we're made to feel over whether we're doing the right thing and possibly taking care away from other people. But I'm happy to say that anything you might have heard in the media about me being forced to pay sanctions because of dismissals under Chapter 74, that's not the case. My lawsuit is very much alive and well. We have one practitioner who is currently, we're in appeals over right now, and that is, again, due to a very tight statute of limitations. We're arguing that the date of harm occurred when it was, to backtrack just a little bit, the therapist who wrote my letter for my mastectomy, they're arguing that the date that the statute of limitations began was the date she wrote the letter, and we're arguing, no. The letter didn't cause harm until the date I had the mastectomy. She had up until that moment to retract her approval and endorsement of my mastectomy, which we believe she had done fraudulently, had included things in the letter that were not true, and yet, despite me ghosting her for those few months between when she wrote the letter and when I had the mastectomy, she did not, in fact, do anything to that nature. So that's a little bit, I'm not a lawyer, a little bit scattered explanation, but an explanation nonetheless.
Great, thanks. Shawn, you had a different experience. Another way to get at this is really through the legislature, and you served 4 terms in the Texas state legislature, and yet you broke ranks with your own party over this issue. Can you tell us about that and some of the obstacles you encountered there?
Yes, good morning. A lot to say about that. Let me just kind of quick summary on where we were in the legislature. Not this session now, but the session before. And we were really confronted with a very simple issue. The bill was called SB 14. It was just about what is the appropriate age of consent, which we've been talking about all morning, for a child. Now, here's where it gets weird. For a child to consent to essentially a sex change surgery, or what is the appropriate age of consent for a child to consent to taking cross-sex hormones or puberty blockers. And so the backdrop on that, for everyone should know, in Texas and well across many, many states in the country, the age of 18 has always been pretty much the standard age of consent, or we'll even go further, 21. It is why children at the age of 16 or 14 or 15 can't enter into contracts. In Texas, people may not realize you cannot legally even get a tattoo under the age of 18 because it's not that, well, a couple of reasons. The public policy behind that is that, very similar to this, is that it's permanent and children are too young under that age to appreciate the long-term risk. In addition to the fact that if your needle is contaminated, for example, you could contract hepatitis. Most children who are 15 or 16 who maybe just want a flower on their arm or put someone's name they like may not be, are probably not conscious and aware enough to understand that. So you can't get a tattoo. You cannot even go to a tanning salon because you can't consent to the risk of getting cancer in Texas under the age of 18. However, and I'll let the cat out the bag, Democrats, the Democratic Party, fully supported all of these other policies. Not only that, the party was, I'm no longer a Democrat, but I'll put that out there for right now, voted to raise the age from 18 to 21 to be able to smoke what we call combustible, which is tobacco cigarettes. Not only that, the party voted to raise the age to 21 to e-vape. Okay, not only that, the party voted to raise the age from 18 to 21 to carry a gun. Now, this was the only area of the law at all where not only did the Democratic Party not want to raise the age or set the age to 18, they wanted no age, meaning you could be 9, you could be 10, you could be 11. And so that's where we were because we had no established precedent. Why? Because of what we've been talking about here, you all. It was unfathomable years ago that we would be contemplating cutting off healthy body parts, I get emotional, of children, giving girls double mastectomies who do not have cancer, cutting off genitals of boys. So there was nothing on the books. So the bill before us was simply to establish the age of 18. I thought, okay, no-brainer. It ended up being a career-defining, life-defining moment when I voted to support that, along with my Republican colleagues, and I was able to convince 3 Democrats to stand with me because of the outside pressures from these ideological groups. And what I'd like to say, you all, is I know we're talking legal, but one of the reasons and what it's going to take, Soren, is yes, we need lawyers who are going to attack this from a medical malpractice standpoint. But the reason, and I can tell you unequivocally, the reason there's so few lawyers that are willing to take this on, even though they know that there's potentially money available for it, which usually drives lawyers, is because this is truly the taking down of a cult. The largest organized, systematic cult in modern times. It truly is. It has all the tenets of a cult. It is love bombing, gaslighting. You heard from the young people today, separating you from your families, creating an us versus them conversation, targeting anyone like myself who were to speak against it. I got death threats. I ended up losing my seat over this, but I have no regrets because I know I'm standing on the side of righteousness, and I'm here today, to encourage all of us. We have to keep this fight. But I spoke out. I think they said it was a 12-minute speech on the House floor that night. It may have been the middle of the night. We were voting on it. And that was after all day of the other side trying to kill this very reasonable bill, which simply was to protect young people. And what we heard today is even 18 may not be enough. You have people that are 19, still very young. And I'd like to add this part. We talk about the science. I tell you about all the other bills. Those proponents of this always say they believe in science. We use evidence to say that the frontal lobe of the brain of young people is not fully developed into what doctors correct me. Is it 24 or 25? 25. Suddenly, they threw all of that science out of the window. We weren't allowed to discuss it, which is what happens in cults. There's no room for dissent. You can't use critical thinking skills when you're in a cult. So suddenly, they threw that out. I spoke on it. Immediately that night, I needed protection to go to my car. The bill did pass, thank goodness. So in the state of Texas right now, this is not allowed legally. There may be doctors, and that's why we have our brave whistleblower, Dr. Heim, who spoke out about hospitals that were still doing this after the bill was signed into law. What I can say, the good news is we have a commander-in-chief, a president now, who is standing on our side, who's signed executive orders to help protect children around the country. But there's 26 states that are doing the right thing, and the rest are not. So it's going to take all of us to continue to work to protect children.
Thank you. And that's a perfect segue to Erin, because you have been so active on the ground, doing everything from ballot initiatives to working with legislatures, proposing, writing bills, to writing briefs at the Supreme Court level. As you look at the executive orders, and we realize there's a limit to what that can actually accomplish, and sort of step back with big picture view, what would you say are the top legal priorities, whether on the federal level or on the state level?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the executive orders brought me to tears. They brought many parents to tears once those were announced. And like Shawn, I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I haven't switched parties for a particular reason, as people can figure out. I'm in California, which is, supermajority Democrat, and they still slammed the door on me. Despite me telling them that I've been a Democrat since I was 18 years old. But I do vote Republican, just so you know. And I will continue to do so until this onslaught of our children ends. But yeah, so federally, there's a lot of things that this new administration is doing that, and I encourage parents to get on board with, and I'm actually going to tell you a website, I'm going to tell it very slowly, where it's a tattletale line, and it goes directly to this administration, and it is ndei.edu.gov. So I know that there are parents out there who have been stockpiling data. We have been keeping the receipts for some people for even 10 years, but I know the real parents were keeping these receipts for like 5 years, and now it's time to use those data points and show our federal government the data that you have and the evidence. My state of California, the very blue states, are ignoring the executive orders. Yeah. And they gave a little, like Dr. Heim talked about, for the first few days. The hospital said, we're not doing this anymore. And then the Attorney General, at least in California, said, no, you must continue mutilating children. And so the hospitals, again, reverted back. They scrubbed some of their websites within days about puberty blockers being irreversible. They took those off their websites. But luckily, the parents, we have those pictures, we have those screenshots. And now it's our time to actually pounce. So federal law needs to help the blue states. we cannot be a patchwork of states that protect children and some states that do not. The reason being, as my friend Tiffany always says, we're not pulling any stars off the flag. And also, no child in the United States is safe until all of them are, because my dear state started the trans sanctuary law, which allows any child to run away to our state, regardless of age, and we take jurisdiction. So
Now there's multiple states that are doing that.
That's right. And so we started it, and then Minnesota, New York, I think there's a few others. And sometimes they make the law a little worse, which I thought was impossible, but they do. Colorado is one of those. But that's, no child is safe. So federal law needs to really take away the funding. And we all understand the money that the gender clinics are making. That's pretty easy to understand what these children are worth, about $500,000 to $1 million, because as our panelists talk about, they're lifelong medical patients, whether they detransition or not. And where the big money is in the nonprofit world.
Yeah, so one follow-up on that. I think one of the great things that people celebrate about the executive order was the simple statement, there are only two sexes, male and female, and then the follow-on HHS spelling out, giving the definitions. How important would you say that is on both federal but also the state level to have legislation like that?
Absolutely vital. When Title IX was passed in 1972, no one thought for a second that we'd have to define female and male. I mean, even 10 years ago, nobody thought that that was required, but that is an absolute requirement, because that disembowels the whole transgender movement in one fell swoop. That definition alone will do it. Yeah. So I 100% agree with you. That's where states should start, and the federal government also.
Shawn, so there was one thing you mentioned. You were talking about how Texas had included the idea of, quote, gender-affirming care in child abuse. What about the flip side of that? What is there a possibility, either on the state level or the federal level, to make it so the law will protect parents who refuse to send their kids down the transition path? Because in some places, that is like California, you run the risk that you're going to be tagged as a child abuser because you're not willing to say yes. How important, from a legislative perspective, do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I'm a little concerned that this thing has turned to where the dog is no longer wagging the tail. The tail can be wagging the dog with that instance. And so we're starting with the premise, just what you said, Erin, what the president has said is that there are two sexes, male and female. And so if we acknowledge that and accept that, and then go further to stop using this manipulative form of language. For example, I don't believe in crafting legislation that uses the word transgender. It is really transsexualism is what they're trying to do. And they created that word to soften the impact and to seduce young people into something. And so I did just a little focus group back when I was in my district, and I asked some folks, do you believe a child can be transsexual? We were doing a town hall, it was about 50 people. Not one parent, not one person, even on the progressive side, would raise their hand that children are transsexual. Then when I said, can a child be transgender? They all started, well, yeah, I've heard that. They don't really know what they're saying, but they've heard it, so they've been indoctrinated. So yes, I do believe it's important to shield parents. But my concern from that is still not addressing the root.
Sure.
That the real thing that's happening is abuse. We've identified it as such. Erin is 100% on it. We cannot have this cherry picking of states that allow child abuse.
Yeah, and you raise an important point about just getting the language right. That it has to be legally sound and strong, which, again, just defining sexes is a good place to start.
And so defining women, women and men. We never thought that. I did a lot of work on maternal mortality and morbidity, preventing women from dying in childbirth. And I was shocked when suddenly all of the legislation that was being proposed changed the word mother to birthing person,
Right.
birthing
right.
parent.
Yeah.
It's all part of the same ideology.
It's the lie, right? It's the lie. So in just the last couple of minutes, I'd ask each of you, just what would your message be to legislatures, to anyone who's working on the legal angles of this? What's your message to them?
For me, it would be to bridge build. Like, please try and work together as human beings. That's my biggest thing. I work on college campuses to try and get students of different political ideologies to see the humanity of one another with that. I also strongly encourage anyone who has any kind of policymaking presence to please work on legislation that enforces insurance companies that if they're going to cover the front end of transgender medicine, if they're going to cover the surgeries and the hormones, that they also need to be held culpable for the complications, the follow-up care, and any reversals or reconstructions. We're trying to pass something in the state of Texas and have been very successful thus far. We have it in both the House and the Senate. However, ERISA limits the impact of that to just 14% of insurance companies. So that's my number one top priority, and I strongly encourage anyone who has the ability to make that happen, please make that happen. That will be the most helpful for those of us who need a ramp off of the identity.
Okay, Shawn?
Two things. I would say when you're talking to people that you know are sympathetic and on the right side, remind them that this is really a war, a battlefield. It's not over. And so to encourage them to stay motivated and continue to speak up. I know there are a lot of folks who care, but maybe they're not so active because they think this is going to resolve itself. And so to those legislators that are on the right side, we need to remind them that they can't just be good men and women of good conscience. They have to have good courage to continue to fight and to stand up for this population. The second thing is for those legislators who are on the opposite side. I don't want to sound cynical because, yes, we have to continue to talk to them, but I was there and I talked to many who candidly admitted to me in private, we know that it's wrong, Shawn. We know. We got it. You don't have to keep, I felt like I was in a nightmare like Invasion of the Body Snatchers where I was knocking on doors saying they're doing this to kids. And finally one person pulled me over and said, Shawn, I know, but hold your nose. Hold your nose and vote with us. Because they don't want to fight. So for those, when you find that happening, I think it's going to take what it always takes. Vote them out.
Okay, last word, Erin?
So a lot of ditto here, but I think it's really important for lawmakers to understand what their power is and to use it. Federal law can be passed that can say that it is not child abuse not to socially or medically transition your child. Because de facto, in the blue states, that's what parents are being accused of is child abuse for not medically transitioning their children. I get a call every other week from a parent who has lost their child to Child Protective Services for not calling their daughter a male name. The simplest thing of that. And the federal government is paying billions of dollars, Doge, I hope you're listening, into these nonprofits that are hiding and saying, we are here to help the poor homeless children, the abused children. But that's not really what the money's going to. Their money is going to these groups that are creating chosen families, made-up families away from their loving parents. So we need to starve them with money. And the legislature can do that. The federal government can do that. And California GOP, those Republicans that are in Democrat holdouts, remember, Donald Trump won all the swing states because of the trans issue.
That's right.
So go forth and be loud and be noisy. It's time to go on the offensive. It's much more fun to be on the offensive, by the way. You will get the Democrats to vote for you. I'm proof positive that we're looking for rational lawmakers. So don't be afraid of the cultural issues. They need to embrace them and run with them. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, we've seen a tremendous cultural shift already. We can win this. Thank you very much.